Picture this. The year is 1930. The Great Depression is in full swing. The world is caught in the throes of a crippling economic downturn, where bread lines stretch around city blocks and joblessness is the norm. It was a time of struggle, of uncertainty, a time when the cost of living was a matter of survival. Now fast forward to today, the year 2024. We're living in an era of technological marvels and global connectivity, but with its own set of economic challenges. The cost of living has risen significantly due to inflation and other factors. But how does today's cost of living stack up against that of the Great Depression era? In this video, we'll delve into the cost of living during these two distinct periods, dissecting the impact of inflation and pondering on what life would be like if inflation was never a part of our economic reality. Now let's take a look at the cost of living during these two vastly different periods. During the Great Depression, life was tough, money was scarce, and the cost of living was a daily struggle. Let's take a moment to step back into the 1930s, a time when the average American family was just trying to get by. The average income was about $1,700 a year. However, keep in mind that quite a few folks were unemployed, so this figure doesn't paint the full picture. The cost of basic necessities, well, those were a constant worry. A loaf of bread would cost you around 9 cents, a gallon of milk, about 50 cents, and a dozen eggs, they'd set you back around 35 cents. Now let's talk about housing. The average rent for a house was $25 a month. Can you imagine? Today, that wouldn't even get you a decent meal at a restaurant. But back then, it was a significant chunk out of a family's income. And what about education? Well, in the 30s, public school was free, but college was another story. A year at a public university would cost around $400. That might seem like pennies compared to today's tuition fees. But remember, that was nearly a quarter of the average yearly income. So the value of money was a whole different ballgame. You could buy a new car for less than $700 and a house for around $6,000. But with the average income being what it was, these were luxuries that many could only dream of. The Great Depression was a time of hardship and struggle. It was a time when families had to make every penny count. Their resilience and resourcefulness during this period are a testament to the human spirit's ability to adapt and persevere in the face of adversity. While it was a difficult time, people found ways to survive and make ends meet. Their stories serve as a reminder of our capacity for resilience and the importance of economic stability. We'll delve into the cost of living in 2024 in the next scene. Fast forward to 2024, and the picture is quite different. In today's world, the cost of living has seen a significant increase, mainly due to the steady march of inflation. The average income has increased, sure, but not nearly enough to keep pace with the rising costs. The cost of basic necessities, such as food, housing, and healthcare, has risen dramatically. Let's break it down a bit. A loaf of bread that used to cost a few cents during the Great Depression now costs a couple of dollars. The price of a home? Well, that's skyrocketed. The median home price is now in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range, a sum that would have been unimaginable back in the 1930s. And let's not forget about healthcare. The cost of medical care has outpaced income growth by a wide margin, making it one of the most significant expenses for many families. Prescription drugs, hospital stays, even routine doctor visits, they all come with a hefty price tag. The value of money, quite simply, isn't what it used to be. A dollar today doesn't stretch as far as it did during the Great Depression. This is the impact of inflation, the steady erosion of purchasing power over time. Your dollar might still be a dollar in your pocket, but it can't buy as much as it once could. Inflation has had a profound impact on our day-to-day lives. It's changed how we budget, how we save, and how we plan for the future. It's made us more conscious of our spending, more diligent about our savings, and more strategic about our investments. Despite the challenges, people continue to adapt and find ways to thrive. We find ways to make our dollars stretch further, to save where we can, and to invest wisely. It's not always easy, but it's a testament to our resilience and adaptability. And that in itself is something to celebrate. Inflation, the silent thief that slowly eats away at the value of your money. A phrase that might sound dramatic, but it's a reality we all face. But what is inflation, really? In its simplest terms, inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, and subsequently, purchasing power is falling. Imagine holding a dollar bill in your hand. With time and due to inflation, the value of that dollar decreases. What you could buy for $1 during the Great Depression is vastly different from what that same dollar can buy today. Moving back to the era of the Great Depression, the average cost of a loaf of bread was around 10 cents. Fast forward to today, and that same loaf costs on average around $3. That's a 30-fold increase. This shift is not because bread has become 30 times more valuable or difficult to produce, but because the value of the dollar has depreciated due to inflation. The dollar bill in your hand can buy less bread today than it could during the Great Depression. Inflation impacts more than just the price of bread, of course. It affects the cost of living across the board, from housing to healthcare, from education to entertainment. It's a critical factor that shapes our economic decisions, influences our saving and spending habits, and even impacts government policies. But it's important to remember that inflation isn't all bad. While it does erode the purchasing power of money, it also stimulates economic growth by encouraging spending and investment. If prices are expected to rise in the future, businesses are more likely to invest in new projects today, and consumers are more likely to make purchases sooner rather than later. Inflation, then, is a bit of a balancing act. It's a critical part of our economic system, but it needs to be managed carefully to ensure it doesn't get out of hand. After all, we've seen what can happen when it does. Just think back to the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic or Zimbabwe. Inflation is a double-edged sword. It can stimulate economic growth but can also erode purchasing power. Imagine a world without inflation. Would things be better, or would they be worse? Inflation, that ever-present specter, is often seen as a troublemaker in our pockets. But what if it didn't exist? What if our dollar today held the same value as it did back during the Great Depression? Let's delve into this intriguing thought experiment, shall we? First, it's important to understand that inflation isn't inherently evil. It's a natural part of a growing economy. When economies expand, prices generally go up. This is because as more people have more money to spend, the demand for goods and services increases, which can drive up prices. Now, if inflation were to disappear, one might initially think this would be a good thing. Your money wouldn't lose its value over time. $1 saved today would be worth $1 tomorrow, next year, even several decades down the line. Sounds pretty good, right? But here's the catch. Without inflation, there's less incentive for people to spend or invest. Why risk your money in the stock market or spend it on a new car when you know it will have the same purchasing power in the future? This could lead to a slowdown in economic activity and potentially stagnation. Moreover, the absence of inflation also means that central banks wouldn't be able to use monetary policy tools, like adjusting interest rates, to stimulate the economy during downturns. This could make economic recessions longer and more severe. So, while it might seem appealing to have a world without inflation, it's not as straightforward as it appears. Inflation, while challenging, can encourage spending and investing, which in turn helps to keep our economy moving. It also provides central banks with the tools they need to manage the economy. Inflation, while challenging, is a necessary part of our economic system. Remember, it's all about balance. Too much inflation can be harmful, but so can too little. It's a delicate dance, one that requires careful management and constant vigilance. So, we've taken a journey from the Great Depression to 2024 and explored the impact of inflation. We've seen how life was back during the gloomy days of the Great Depression, where the cost of living was low, but so were wages and opportunities were scarce. Fast forward to today in 2024, where the cost of living has dramatically increased. Whether it's a loaf of bread or a house, everything costs significantly more than it did back then. However, it's not just about prices going up. We've also touched on the role of inflation, a driving force behind these changes. Inflation, while often viewed negatively, plays a crucial part in our economic system. It encourages spending and investment, which in turn helps to fuel economic growth. But what if inflation wasn't a thing? It might seem like a dream, but without inflation, the economy could stagnate, with less incentive to spend or invest. As we move forward, the cost of living and the impact of inflation will continue to shape our lives and our economy.